450 million years ago. It is a thriving water world, filled with strange and amazing creatures. An ocean paradise. But a killer from space is heading this way. Throughout the Earth's history, catastrophic events have caused numerous mass extinctions. But each time total annihilation seems inevitable, nature snaps back with remarkable resiliency. These mass extinctions are a brutal part of our past and could be part of our future. Who will live and who will die? The answers may surprise you. Now, witness the first mass extinction in the planet's history. Death rays on Animal Armageddon. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. Charles Darwin, 1859. Our planet's first great mass extinction begins 500 million years ago, long before humans, long before even the dinosaurs. A controversial theory suggests this cataclysm could have started 6,000 light years from Earth. A dying star in the Milky Way implodes and goes supernova. Massive beams of energy shoot from its poles, a gamma-ray burst. These are the largest explosions in the known universe. The 10-second blast contains more energy than 1,000 suns. The lethal rays rush violently through the cosmos at the speed of light, on a collision course with a small blue planet, Earth.
If it were close enough, it would blow the atmosphere off the planet. Here we're sitting 1 minute in this beautiful, nice, cloudy day, and then boom, where'd the air go? And it is literally blown off into space.
Given that gamma ray bursts are the most destructive things that happen in the universe, if these things happen close enough, there's just no possibility that any type of life could survive such an event. It would literally eviscerate the entire surface of the planet, burn it to a crisp. Nothing could survive.
No one's sure what caused this mass extinction. The gamma ray burst is one compelling theory. If true, then the countdown to mass extinction of all life on planet Earth has begun. Thousands of light years from the rocketing death rays, Earth orbits peacefully, unaware of the impending doom. This is a glimpse 450 million years into the past, the Ordovician period, a vastly different world from today. The continents as we know them now are still part of several land masses. Gondwana encompasses Australia, Africa, Southern Europe, Antarctica, and South America. Fragments of North America, Western and Northern Europe are concentrated at the equator. The planet is warm and wet, with sea levels hundreds of feet higher than they are now. The giant Panthalassic Ocean engulfs much of the northern hemisphere. Most of the U.S. lies underwater beneath vast, shallow oceans called epicontinental seas.
Epicontinental seas would be marine environments, oceans, that covered parts of the continent. And in the Ordovician, we had higher sea level, and much of our continental area was covered with ocean.
The surface of this world is more like Venus than modern Earth. The oxygen level is so low any animal would struggle for every breath.
If you put a human back in the Ordovician, the oxygen concentrations would have been such that probably a simple walk on the beach would have been very strenuous. The land would be extremely barren. It would pretty much look like the land looks today in places like Death Valley. Just no green, no animals. Because of that, also, it would have been extremely quiet. None of the noises that we associate with animals that you would hear in a forest, like birds, even insects, none of that would have been present back in the Ordovician.
The surface world may be desolate, but underwater, it's a different story. This rich seascape will one day be a desert sitting under the Las Vegas Strip. For now, it's a bustling city in its own right, a vast coral reef teeming with weird inhabitants.
There is a perception, I think, oh, it's ancient, it's 500 million years old, it must have been empty. It wasn't empty, it was full. It was just differently full than we have today. Certainly organisms were living in the deep sea, they were living in the water column, they were living in the sediment, on the sediment. And much of the western U.S. would have been a shallow marine habitat. Much of the middle of the U.S., Cincinnati, and much of the Appalachians would have been habitats that aren't equivalent to anything we have today.
Reefs just like this span the globe. Their warm, sunlit waters are the perfect home for the planet's rapidly evolving life forms. Along these reefs, 2-foot-long trilobites scavenge for food. Related to today's ants, these industrious creatures keep the seafloor clean, gobbling up almost anything they can find: dead plankton, bits of algae, even animal waste. They share their turf with an evolutionary newcomer, Astraspis, one of only a few primitive fish species on Earth. Just 6 inches long, this small creature could fit in the palm of your hand. But this animal has a mutation never before seen on Earth, a primitive backbone. Astraspis fossils unearthed in the early 20th century revealed a fibrous sheath along its back, used to protect a spinal cord. The very same structure is in our own bodies. It's hard to believe, but this lowly creature is the ancestor of every vertebrate on the planet today: birds, reptiles, mammals, man. Our existence is entirely dependent on the survival of this single group. And so far, the odds are not in its favor.
These are creatures which weren't very efficient in many ways. They certainly were not predators. They could eat scum and microbes and algae, and they were prey.
At the other end of the food chain, a super predator rules the seas. A merciless killer feared by all. The straight nautiloid.
These are obligate carnivores. These are things that eat meat and always want meat. A 12-footer would be unbelievably scary. You would be swimming for your life, and this thing would be chasing you, and it would eat you if it could catch you.
The great white shark of its time, the nautiloid is a perfectly designed killing machine. Up to 20 feet long, with an insatiable hunger. A straight-chambered shell filled with air keeps this 300-pound beast buoyant. It slices through the sea by inhaling water, then forcing it out through a small muscular tube at the base of the shell. It's the Ordovician world's version of a jet engine, but with a strange twist. Nautiloids swim far more efficiently backwards.
They have a jet propulsion system, so it's not a constant swimming like a fish. It's like a little piston that swim, 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 swim. You're in the water with a nautiloid. You see the back of a shell. You have to go all the way around it to see the swimming part, because the head, the tentacles, everything goes backwards.
Though nautiloids reign supreme, there is competition. giant sea scorpions called eurypterids routinely challenge the nautiloids for the best feeding grounds.
As repulsive and hideous as scorpions on land are, I think they would not hold a candle in nastiness to the sea scorpions. These things were huge. You had probably 200 or 300 pound monsters. These are the biggest arthropods in the history of the planet.
Eurypterids are enormous, 6 feet long, with some as heavy as an NFL lineman. Their legs, called chelicerae, are covered in bristly spines. The last chelicerae are flattened, forming a type of fin used for swimming. Facing off against a nautiloid, it's like a death match straight out of science fiction.
I think you could probably sell tickets to a fight between those two. I'd give anything to see a big eurypterid tangle with a big nautiloid.
But everything is about to change. Forever. The death rays have already penetrated our solar system and seared through the asteroid belt. A gamma-ray burst hitting Earth is so rare, scientists believe it only happens once every 500 million years. This one will strike before the day is done. This is 0 Hour. The gamma-ray burst rips into the upper reaches of the atmosphere with astronomical force. But it's as ferocious as it is beautiful. The deadly rays shatter air molecules, literally blasting the atmosphere apart.
Just consider the nuclear arsenals of the United States and Russia. If you were to set off all of those bombs simultaneously, the amount of energy that would be released is just a tiny drop in the bucket of the amount of energy that would be released during a gamma-ray burst.
Just 10 seconds after it began, the light show gives way to an eerie calm. It is broad daylight, but there is a strange companion star next to our sun. This is the burning embers of the supernova, an extra light in the sky that will flicker for a few months, then disappear. With no animals on land, the light show passes unnoticed, an awesome spectacle played to an empty theater. Life seems to go back to normal. But the future of every species alive today, from the lowliest insect to the human race, is now hanging by a thread. It is now 24 hours after the gamma-ray burst. Extinction begins at the microscopic level. In the upper reaches of Earth's atmosphere, the gamma rays have destroyed 30% of the protective ozone layer. Now, ultraviolet radiation from the sun is able to pour in. The light is unbearably harsh, 50 times more intense than at the Sahara Desert.
Well, let's just say if a gamma-ray burst hit the planet, every tanning salon would go out of business, no longer necessary. Anything on land would definitely be fried.
Unseen to the naked eye, The planet's plankton, the microscopic animals and plants that float near the ocean's surface, are the first to feel the effects.
If you could take a drop of water from the ocean and put it on a slide, look at it under a microscope, you'd see all kinds of tiny things teeming within that slide. And basically, those tiny things are the things that bigger things eat.
The life-giving sun burns the majority of these organisms to death. The entire base of the food chain is wiped out.
If you disrupt the phytoplankton, the most immediate effect is going to be on those animals that are feeding on the phytoplankton. These tend to be very small animals. Often they're arthropods.
Now, lack of food joins the harsh sunlight, wreaking havoc on the plankton feeders. The surface water used to be a nursery for many trilobite species, but the larvae can't survive the scorching UV rays.
It's like an atomic bomb attack. It's the radiation you don't see. You can't see it. You get sick. You don't know why. It's just in the air. With the death of so many of the corals and the animals on top, the whole food chain begins to collapse. And so down through the food chain, it's like dominoes toppling.
The UV radiation is most intense in the tropics. Coral reefs begin to die. The disaster spreads from there. In almost every corner of the globe, coral reefs are starving to death. The devastation ripples up the food chain. More and more animals suffer with hunger pangs. As the weeks go by, the destruction of coral reefs grows.
Corals are composed of an animal, yes, but they also have tiny plants in their flesh. They're called zooxanthellae, and they pull out of the flesh, they swim off into the oceans, leaving the coral without them. Very quickly, we would have started seeing this whole thing turn into this ghostly, bony color.
Only 3 months have passed, and yet the side effects of the death rays are felt far and wide. Mating season for these coiled nautiloids is in full swing. These cousins of the straight nautiloids are generally small, just the width of your hand. But the coiled shell is a much more maneuverable design than the straight shell. Mating rituals are more important than ever. The survival of the entire species is at stake. The females pursue the males. The more colorful his shell, the more irresistible she will find him.
Reproduction had an awful lot to do, I think, with who survived and who didn't. The way you reproduced may have had as much to do with survival or not as the mode of life of the adult.
The world may be collapsing around her, but she's determined to secure a future for her offspring. Her eggs will incubate for the next 8 months. Only time will tell whether this mother's efforts are in vain. With the bottom of the food chain decimated, the global famine deepens, driving the weak to an early death. In what is now southern Mexico, predators like the Eurypterid resort to extraordinary measures to stay alive. Normally, the armor-plated Astraspus wouldn't be worth the effort, but starving Eurypterids now pounce on anything they can find. Even the corpses of dead nautiloids.
The big carnivores, which eat live stuff and also scavenge on dead stuff, would have been the last to feel anything happening. But over time, even they too are going to die off because the food chain works as sort of an accelerating ripple right through the entire ecosystem.
In what is now the Atlantic coast of North America, giant straight nautiloids abandon the dying reefs in search of food. They move into brackish water. But this is the Eurypterid's turf. With nautiloids moving into these waters, in search of food, the ancient power struggle with the Eurypterids is renewed. This may be the Eurypterids' territory, but fortune still favors the larger creatures. For the nautiloids, it's a feast. Only a few Eurypterids manage to escape. But famine is inescapable, even for the once powerful. As the gamma-ray apocalypse intensifies, extinction threatens every species, from microscopic plankton to the giant nautiloids, to our own ancestors, the jawless fish, Astraspis. If they don't survive, will there be a future for anyone? How do scientists really know that mass extinctions occurred in the distant past? The Earth itself holds the key.
As geologists began to really start collecting fossils for the first time, they realized that there were fossils that were present within a specific group of rocks that weren't present above. But at some of the rock divisions, there would be wholesale disappearance.
What these early geologists